Hey everyone, it was round 4 of the British Chess Championships today, and my pick of the round was between David Howell and Andrew Smith. Now, David Howell is one of England's top grandmasters, and he's always bordering around the 2700 mark in FIDE terms, so he's a very strong player indeed. And he's up against an Irish player, Andrew Smith, who's had a very good tournament so far, so we'll see what happens. David Howell is playing white, and Andrew Smith is playing black. White kicks off with d4, black plays knight to f6, and David Howell opts for knight to f3, so very flexible opening choice. And now black hits with c5, so straight away attacking the d4 pawn. D takes c4 is an option here, but then black can just play e6 and equalises fairly quickly. If white tries to hold on to this pawn with b4, black can just play a5, and white gets into a bad game, especially if they continue trying to hold on to this pawn with c3. After a takes b4, c takes b4, black can play moves like b6 and still retain the pawn back, and actually black has a nice position now. So in the game, Howell didn't do this, he just pushed the pawn forward with d5, and black played g6. Howell now played knight to c3, so this is a very nice opening indeed for white, just because white doesn't want to commit the c pawn early and play c4. Instead, they leave the c4 square free for maybe a piece, and potentially can thrust the c pawn up at a later date. Now, I'm not too booked up on this opening, but I was having a look at some forums, and an IM said, if you play this as black, it's probably better to think of a better opening, because he believes this is really good for white. So I'm going to take his word on it. So bishop g7 is played by black, and white plays e4. So white's pretty much dominating the centre here with their two pawns. And black plays d6. Mind you, black's setup isn't too bad here. They just put all the pawns on dark squares, and this bishop on g7 stands very nice. Black's aim is to just castle here. The only problem I can think of is this c8 bishop is going to struggle to find squares, and it can be quite hard to develop this knight too, and the c8 bishop at the same time. In the game though, Howell seemed to solve this problem for black. He played bishop to b5 check, and I'm guessing Howell's thinking is that white also doesn't have a good square to put their white square bishop on. The two centre pawns are on white squares, and I'm guessing the only other square really for the bishop is to put it on e2 and just wait for an opening. But Howell decides to take a more direct approach and play bishop b5 check, and of course black just plays bishop to d7. White now plays a4, so if black captures on b5, there will come a takes b5 with an open a file for white's rook. If black plays a6 here, I think white can actually just retreat back to e2 this time instead of taking on d7. After castles, and white can play knight to d2. So white's plan is very simple now, just to play a5 and maybe knight c4 and target this b6 square. And this knight on b8 is very difficult to develop, just because this d pawn covers this c6 square. And again, this bishop on d7 has very little squares to manoeuvre to. So black carries on sensibly, just castles kingside, and white also is very sensible and cautious. They play h3, just covering this g4 square so the bishop can't move to it or the knight at a later date. Again, if a6 here from black, I think white can just play moves like bishop to d3, and again this d7 bishop is really struggling for squares now, and it's going to be very hard to develop the b8 knight. If queen c7, white can just castle. After e6, rook e1, maybe captures and rook e8, white can just play moves like bishop f4, and white is clearly better in this position, just due to the fact that white's easily developed and the pieces are much more dynamic. So I think black made the right choice now. They took on b5, bishop takes b5, and Howell captured on b5 with the pawn, opening their rook on the a file. Black developed, knight bd7, white developed, and black played a6 here to attack b5. Howell captured on a6, rook takes, and they recaptured twice with b takes a6, and Howell now played queen to e2 to attack this a6 pawn. Black played queen a8 to defend it. Howell here played b3, so their idea now is to play bishop to b2, and also the rook was coming into b8 anyway, so it makes a lot of sense to play b3 now. And the idea is just to contest this bishop on g7 and play bishop b2. And swap these two bishops off most likely. So knight e8 is played, attacking the c3 knight. Howell plays bishop b2 to defend, and black plays knight to c7. So white gets on with their plan of trying to swap these bishops off with knight to a4. After rook b8, white plays rook to a1, so gets their other up on the open file, and black plays rook to b4 with some nice play, active play indeed. But white now captures on g7, king takes g7, and there's several moves that white can play here. Knight d2 was an option for Howell here, maybe putting the knight into c4. If black ever plays knight to e5, white can simply play f4, kicking it away back to d7, and then get on with the plan of knight to c4. And if king g8, let's say white can play rook d1 and start launching these pawns up the board in the centre, and it's a very nice game for white. In the game though, Howell played knight to b2 with a similar idea. What this does is just open the a file up, and maybe white wants to play knight to c4 at some point, maybe knight d2, and start launching these pawns up the board. Black now had a very interesting plan here. So they played queen to h8 in the game, so they're going to try and get the queen on the dark squares by using this manoeuvre, and most likely play king g8 next move. Knight c4 is played, and of course king g8, so now this queen stands on this nice diagonal. But white's plan is very simple, just play rook e1, and again their idea is just play e5. Andrew Smith played queen f6, and queen d2 now, and actually white is ready to launch the pawns forward if they ever wish to. So the queen defends the d5 pawn, and this rook is now behind the e pawn. Black plays king g7, and now white plays knight to a5, preparing knight to c6, attacking the rook, and also still would help this e5 square. If rook b6 here, white can just play knight to c6 anyway, and if e6, white can start harassing the king side with knight to h2. If captures, then knight g4 is really strong, threatening moves like queen h6 with the knight. If queen h4 to defend, then e takes d5 is absolutely fine, and actually this is just a clear win for white now. This is due to the fact that this open diagonal against the king is so strong, and white's knights are just so much more dynamic. If black goes for cheapos with like knight takes d5, this doesn't actually work due to queen takes d5, and the knight on c6 is still protected. Again, if move like knight to f6, white can just clean up with queen takes d6. If black plays a move like knight to e5, then white can just captures, and play moves like queen a5 here, and this is actually really annoying for black. If they defend, then white actually has nice moves like queen c3, just winning all these pawns. So in this position black does have to be very wary. Rook b5 was played in the game, so attacking the knight on a5, but now Howell just moves it to c6 anyway, and black plays h6, stopping any knight g5 ideas. I did wonder about knight to h2 here. I think this is good for white, but black can actually play knight to e5, stopping knight g4. And if captures, queen can capture, and maybe knight g4 now, but then queen g5 can be played. White's forced to play f4, and queen h4 actually just about holds on for black. But again, white's position is really nice here, and I think white is definitely winning this position, so there's no question. So after h6, knight to h2 was definitely possible. But I think now white just starts to gain control of the position. In the game, Howell just got on with his plan of playing e5, so he plays e5 finally, attacking the queen. Black captures, and now takes with the knight from Howell. A recapture occurs, and I think Howell made a mistake here actually. In the game he took with the rook, I think he should actually take with the knight instead. Preparing moves like d6, and also again knight g4 as we discussed. If queen d6 to block, again knight g4 is super strong, and if h5, knight c3 can be played and start harassing the black king. f6 is pretty much the only way to defend this attack, but then queen e3 can be played, threatening queen h6. If black captures the knight, just take on e7, queen takes e7, rook takes, king f8, and just win material back with rook takes c7, and white has a fantastic game. So knight takes e5 here was certainly stronger. This is because after rook takes e5, the tactics favour black. So as you'll notice here, the white knight on c6 defends the e5 rook. So if black now plays a move like rook to b6, attacking the knight, they're also inadvertently attacking the rook on e5 with the queen. If queen e3 to defend the rook, black can play e6 and undermine the d5 pawn and start threatening the knight on c6 as well. Queen takes c5 is considered the best move, but then black can now play knight takes d5, holding on to the rook on b6. And I should just tell you that the cheapo of rook takes d5 doesn't work here. So white's attacking the rook now and just won a knight, but actually black can now play rook b5, and this actually loses material for white. White is now forced to take on b5 with the queen. After captures, and queen c3, it is now black who's winning this position. But luckily for Howell, black missed this rook to b6 move and instead played c4 here. I'm not entirely sure what c4 does. I think it just gives white another pawn. I don't know if this was down to time trouble or just simply a mistake, but anyway, Howell just captures on c4. Black plays rook b1 check and Howell just plays rook to e1. We trade rooks and black plays king to f8 to defend this e7 pawn. But now Howell just plays queen a5, attacking a6 and the knight on c7 at the same time. If black plays queen to d6 here, white can actually play queen c3, threatening mate on h8. And if queen f6, we can capture and play d6, and there's no way to stop this d pawn. If knight to e6, just d7, and even if black plays a move like a5, white can just get a queen. After captures, and a4. After knight c6, a3, and knight to b4, white's just about in time, and it's a one endgame for white. After queen a5, black played knight to e8. Howell took on a6. Black played queen f4, maybe trying to get a perpetual, but Howell is wise to this and just plays queen a7, attacking e7, and also defends the f2 pawn. Black defends with queen f6, and white now puts pressure on with c5, stopping black from moving to moves like knight d6. Queen g5 is played, and white just plays queen a1, threatening mate on h8 and defending the back rank. Black plays knight to f6 to block the queen, but Howell just finishes black off now with d6, threatening to get a queen and take on e7 and then possibly take on f6 with the queen as well. For instance, if queen takes c5 here, d takes e7, king e8, the queen can just capture on f6. After d6, black played e6, and Howell just finished the game with d7, and there's no way to stop white from getting that queen. If knight takes d7 here, queen to h8 is mate, and everything else black has to give up the queen. So in this game, Howell was actually better all the way through, and the only thing black missed really was rook b6 here. So Howell did make a few errors, but overall he played a fantastic game here and went on to win the game, and now stands at 3.5 points out of 4 and has a very good chance of winning the British Championships this year. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed this video. I'll be with you for round 5 tomorrow, where I'll pick another game. Hope to see you there. Thanks guys, and see you next time.